Welcome to another episode, all. Throughout this episode, I'm going to be talking about Robert Francis Kennedy Jr., the son of Robert Kennedy Sr., and I'm going to explain why he is so incompetent for the position that he is in at the moment, putting the US in danger. Robert Kennedy seems to be claiming that ever since 1989, there's been some big epidemic of chronic diseases, and he is falsely accusing the CDC and all the other scientific industries throughout all the way across America that they've never been investigating or asking these questions about this increase of chronic disease. Such as got a very big obsession with autism, for example, but autism's not fatal. But what about all the other fatal conditions which actually lead to someone's death? Why isn't he interested in investigating those? I'd be more interested in finding cures for cancer, since cancer actually kills, than a cure for autism. I would say the therapeutic approaches in autism are far better than drugs altogether. Plus, Kennedy claims that he wants to stop Big Pharma, so giving Big Pharma more drugs to sell is not taking them down. That's not going to bring the prices down, that's going to take the prices up. Robert seems to have a very low sense of logic. He's always full of logical fallacies on his talk, on his hearing which he had last week, from the time of this recording. He was doing things like dichotomy, false dilemma. He was playing a double standard. He was doing Mott and Bailey. He was doing a lot. And sometimes just falsely accusing the very members of staff who reminded him what he said. Such as one of them on the hearing reminded him that he promised that everyone in the US would be able to get access to vaccines throughout his whole time in this office, but today you've got to be over 65 to access a COVID-19 vaccine, for example. So he hasn't kept his promises. And back to this disease epidemic, we actually already know the answer of why diseases have gone so far up in diagnosis rates. We've got Bob here, who's thinking that because more people have been diagnosed, he's thinking that the disease rates have gone up. But no, he's talking about things like autism, ADHD, etc. You know, there's things which are not fatal, exactly. But no, it's not there's more people. It's we've got greater tools to diagnose people now. We've got greater awareness. The diagnostic criteria has changed throughout it all. That's the responsibility for the increase of there. That's just one of them. We've got the another cause of poverty. By making people homeless, people are more likely to stay out on the street, and but they're going to get sicknesses. You can't even seem to comprehend that. You know, I didn't hear anything from him about poverty. What he's interested in doing about that. In his hearing, for some reason at times he kept silent. Why couldn't he even provide answers to the senators' questions, regardless of which side they were on, whether they were Democrats or Republicans? Why exactly? He seems to have a great level of ignorance towards genetics altogether, and this is why immigration is another cause of the increase of diseases. By people immigrating, they are moving to foreign areas, and in foreign areas there is foreign pathogens. And what we can see through science, actual science, not Bob's pseudoscience, but for what scientists who have been working in the actual fields do, see that diseases and mutations, genetic variants, tend to be geographical. So just for example, if we think of malaria, malaria is endemic across the equator, from Nigeria to southwestern Europe, for example. And in the mid-20th century, it was observed by an African geneticist that birds across the equator didn't seem to get as many malaria infections as other people in the world. But then what became observed later on is the ones that were not getting malaria infections had a copy of the sickle cell mutation. And it was observed that the sickle cell mutation was more dominant among that area. So we can see a correlation here between genetic variants, mutations, and between what diseases are around, such as the sickle cell mutations not as dominant in Europe, Northern Europe area, or Canada, for example, and we don't get many developing it there. And most people who develop the diseases are actually from another land, from a foreign land. So that adds a bit more evidence towards that. That diseases and mutations are associated with each other, are geographical, which will promote survival. And since evolution works from natural selection, it makes perfect sense there. But Bob's not even educated in any scientific discipline whatsoever. But you don't even need to have a scientific discipline to be able to see how incompetent Bob's claims are. Such as, he goes saying he wants to remove all the conflicts of interest. But we can see that he and his whole advisory board for vaccines, we can see that he's full of all the dogma following Andrew Wakefield, that, vaccines cause autism, which might explain to you why he's so focused on autism, but less focused on things like cancer. But so focused on autism to promote his anti-vaccine and his anti-vaxxers. Does it make sense to any of you that he would just sack all 17 on the advisory board of immunisation, of vaccines, and then suddenly, do you think it's a coincidence that we're all replaced with anti-vaxxers? Others among the anti-vax group. I don't see that as coincidental. Bob goes saying that, oh no, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. He often denies it. Then why exactly does he do lawsuits to try and reduce vaccines? What was he doing with that? Why was he in leadership of an organisation that spreads this dogma of vaccines causing autism? Why does he say to people, there's no safe or effective vaccine, they're all dangerous? Does that sound like someone who supports vaccines and the usage of them? Bob can't seem to comprehend that the climate change that we are experiencing has an effect and causes diseases, such as with the global warming, we're getting more heat waves coming in, which is causing more heat-related disorders, such as it causes an increase in cardiovascular disorders, so that's going to go up. And so, when it comes to age, mate, I'm a trained genealogist, so I've seen records with people's death ages and death dates from about 50 years ago and further back. For thousands of years I've seen the death dates of people and what age they died at. Less than a century ago, the age people died at was around 60. Was between 60 and 70. That was their death ages on all the records that you can find on family history websites and family history organisations to find records that could help you build your family tree. But today they say that the average age to die at is 80. So medical science has actually moved us along, and actually they've successfully increased the human lifespan by 2 decades within the last century. So if we're going to stay alive for longer, there's a greater chance that we're going to develop diseases. People develop things like dementia, Alzheimer's, etc. It's usually after the age of 60, which might explain why the retirement age is around 60 or 65, for example. So by keeping people alive for longer, they're actually already sick, they're giving birth to other children, and by keeping them alive for longer, there's more people to be sick, more people to develop diseases. But if we didn't bother doing any medical science and we just left them to die, they would have died before they developed the disease, so the disease wouldn't have gone up. I can remember as recently as 25 years ago when I was a child, the world's population was about 6 billion. But today we're saying we've got over 8 billion in the world's population. Why can't Bob comprehend that the overpopulation, by having more people in the world, more people will develop diseases? Why can't you comprehend that? So I would say up to just what I've mentioned up to now, it illustrates a great level of incompetence. But back at his hearing, one of the things he said right at the start when he was setting his case was, he said, "Oh, I know that millions of lives were saved by the COVID-19 vaccine." He went saying. He's saying he's got evidence for it. Then later on in the hearing, he said he's got evidence from the CDC. Then later on in the meeting, he goes saying, "Oh no, all the data by the CDC is corrupted. All the data by the FDA, by the NIH, by the paramedics, all of it is corrupted." So what's Francis here? What's Bob Francis Kennedy doing, relying on what he claims to be corrupted data? Is that a valid case? One moment he says he trusts the CDC, then he claims he doesn't, then he claims he does, then he claims he doesn't, going back and forward. So does he know what he's talking about? And often people in logical fallacies and people who are guilty often project onto others their own guilt. So where he was like shouting out at people, to some of the senators, "You're just making things up, you're just making things up." It's Bob who's just making things up. For example, I'll give a few other examples. On a podcast he went on Joe Rogan, the Joe Rogan podcast, he said that Wi-Fi causes cancer. He can't seem to comprehend from that we've been around with radio waves for hundreds of years, our species has. And no, it hasn't caused any forms of diseases if it's at the typical level. But we do know that the radiation, so when we get to things like UV, X-ray and gamma, when we get to those waves, those ones can cause cancer, but not radio waves, not microwaves, not infrared, not light. It's the ones above the light which are stronger. They're the ones that can cause us cancer, such as sun cancer, for example. Yeah, but not freaking radio waves. I'm surrounded by Wi-Fi at the minute. I've got some just to my left, There's some here, there's some behind me. You know, there's Wi-Fi all around me. My neighbours have it, so I'm surrounded by Wi-Fi, by radio waves, and I've been so for over 20 years. So why don't I have any forms of cancer? If radio waves cause cancer. He can't even think of that. He can't question his own claims. But that's what, if it's scientific, he should be doing. He should question his own claims, his own beliefs. So if we go by the vaccine again, since he's an anti-vacciner, claim that vaccines cause autism. Autism predates vaccines. So what was causing autism thousands of years ago? What? He doesn't even know the cause today, and he said he would know the cause by September. If he goes saying it's some kind of medication, more than 1% of the world's population have consumed that medication. So if that's the cause of it, why is only approximately 1% or 2%, 1 to 2 depending where you're getting your numbers from, why is as little as that autistic? If that is really the cause of autism. Nearly everyone gets vaccinated with things like the MMR vaccine. Nearly everyone's been vaccinated with a COVID vaccine, polio, etc. Nearly everyone has. So, once again, why is it only about 2% of the world's population are autistic? So, it doesn't quite add up. So, he can't even question his own beliefs. That shows that he's also a bigot. That he will never acknowledge that, oh, I possibly am wrong. But we know it's not just possibly he's wrong, we know he is wrong. We know that vaccines don't cause autism. They've been studying this for decades now. There's decades of data, decades of information, that all goes showing that autism is heritable. That it's got a high level of heritability, has lots of genetic variations, genetic variants, mutations, for example, but he entirely ignores that. Altogether, he just ignores it. So, ups now we found out he's full of logical fallacies, he's an eugenicist, he's an anti-vaccine campaigner, he's an absolute hypocrite doing conflict of interest himself and hiring people doing conflict of interest while claiming that, he's trying to stop conflicts of interest. So now he's an outright liar there. He goes saying that someone said to him that, oh, I'm not trustworthy. He said, oh, I asked her, the head of the CDC, the CDC director, but he asked her, are you trustworthy? But then he said that she said, no. Who would go say that they're not trustworthy? Do any of you really believe that? Especially when she wrote an op-ed piece in an article which said that, no, she didn't say that, where she's saying the opposite. He goes saying on there that everyone besides him and people who agree with him, if you don't agree with him, if he thinks you've been scammed, he thinks you've fallen for it all. Now I'd like to let you know, I am not denying Big Pharma. I know that Big Pharma's real. I've even published this book where I write about Big Pharma in there. A book I published called Neurodiversity. I've written about Big Pharma in there that it's actually normative for those who are right at the top of things like pyramid schemes. Those are right at the top of it. The ones who get the money and directs the money. But they're the ones who do all the fraud and scams. But the actual scientists, who are doing the science, making the drugs, looking for cures to diseases, disorders, etc. They're not the ones who are being frauds. They're not the ones being running scams. But they get given drugs by Big Pharma, and it's Big Pharma that distorts all the data, telling the physicians that, oh, this drug works. Oh, this drug doesn't do this, doesn't do that. And that's why I usually question doctors when I see a doctor, if it involves a medication, treatment, surgery. I always like to ask them questions about it before I actually accept the treatment. Such as I was offered brain surgery in the past for my epilepsy, but all the doctor said to me was, you've got a 66% chance of becoming seizure free, when they were talking about removing a part of my brain. I was like, is that all that will happen? I'm pretty sure if you take out a part of my brain, more than that will happen. If you remove a part of my brain, I'm sure there'll be negative effects. Something I can promise you all. All medical interventions, whether it's drugs, surgeries, therapeutics, etc., all of them have potential side effects, unanticipated effects, and all of them have the possibility of hurting us. So it's a matter that we're getting informed about all the cons and all the pros, and it's our decision, or if for children, the parents' decision, to decide, do the pros outweigh the cons? And if the pros outweigh the cons, we'll usually accept it. Such as, that's why I accepted the vaccines. And so when we got to the COVID vaccine, I accepted the first one, jabbed in. I accepted the second one, but the second one began leaving a bit of pain in there. And that pain was there for several months. So I know this second one's having it's doing something wrong to me. It shouldn't be leaving me in this pain that I'm feeling. So I know these vaccines are not suitable for me. So when they then offered the boosters, I went, no thank you. The second vaccination, it went leaving pain in, so it's got some kind of side effect on me. So, sorry, I don't think it's worth getting more side effects or making the side effects worse. So just by knowing that all treatments have potential side effects, as long as you're informed about it, they shouldn't be charged for it, because it's your decision of whether you accept the treatment or not. During Bob's watch, what we've come to find is that for the first time in over 2 decades, the measles are killing people in the United States. But so many deaths have occurred now during Bob's watch. So you can't even comprehend that he's going to be removing herd immunity. That us as a population, he seems to want to spread these disorders, these diseases. He seems to want to spread them, but he claims, oh no, I want to cure them. If he wanted to cure them, why didn't he put any solutions on the table? Why hasn't he even thought about it? He hasn't even tried to think of any solutions. He's an absolute disgrace to his family. And additionally, his family, cousins, aunties, siblings, all go saying it is a predator. That he's a danger to the United States, to the country. So we've got a lot of evidence already that it's an absolute fraud, it's an anti-vaxxer. And the anti-vaccine movement is a political movement. It claims that, I don't want any political agendas within our medical services. But he's full of political agendas, as well as his other anti-vaccine movement members. So he's gone adopting people with political agendas and brought them in, and then gone stopping people from taking vaccines. We can see that he's taken his movement, Andrew Wakefield's movement, into your medical services, those of you in the United States. So I would say that for your own sake, you are going to have to get rid of Bob. Either have him to resign or have him removed. And just like you know, I'm not a US citizen. I don't live in the United States and never have. I live in the United Kingdom. So if people from other parts of the world, such as myself, someone in the United Kingdom who's not a Republican, not a Liberal, not a Democrat, so if I'm not on any of those political parties over there, but can see there's a great concern and that Bob is a great danger, not just to his own country, but to the world, do you really think you should leave him in place? I actually find it hard to believe that anyone nominated him to begin with. If I were in the US and knew that Bob is an anti-vacciner, I would never choose to elect Bob as someone still with vaccines to have any position of authority or power which has something to do with vaccines. I'd say, no, you're not suitable for this. You've got too many temptations that you'll stop vaccines. So I would never have elected him just by knowing that he's an anti-vacciner. Now, for the disabled community, as that's why I've been keeping an eye on Bob, as soon as Bob went saying that, I'm going to find the cause of autism by September. In other words, this month, as I'm recording this. Well, that's what got me to keep my eye on him, because I'm a neurodiversity activist. So, I don't want them doing eugenics. So I don't want them finding things to do with the genetic engineering, CRISPR, to go removing all these genes from the gene pool, when I know that'll result in great danger and great losses. And that's why I don't see myself as suitable to be on any medical service, because I've got a bias. My bias is neurodiversity, the neurodiversity paradigm, instead of the pathology paradigm that the medical services use. So I've got a bias, a conflict of interest, such as if I actually worked among the services, people may see me as a greater authority, that they may purchase my book, and that may be perceived as a conflict of interest. We'll see that I make videos about neurodiversity. If I were doing it to make money out of, making YouTube videos, that'd be another conflict of interest, or could at least be perceived as one. So I don't see myself as suitable for it, to work in any medical services, when I directly oppose so many of what the medical scientists claim. Such as, I don't agree that we should be curing autism. I don't believe we should be preventing Down syndrome. We shouldn't be doing genocide through abortion on them. I don't agree with that. So many neurodivergent disabilities, no, I don't think we should cure, but that goes right against the science community. So I'll be turning the evidence down. But Bob goes saying that he's pro-science, but he will only ever accept science when science tells him what he wants to hear. So even though science doesn't agree with me at the moment with my theories, I still have my theories, but I may go imposing that onto the science community if I worked with them. But what I've done throughout my life is I've actually come up with my own theories about disabilities, such as with autism. I came up with what someone called Damien Milton calls the double empathy problem. He came up with that in 2012, but I came up with it back in 2006. Yeah, in the year 2006, when I was at secondary school, I was transferred to a special education school where there's other autistic people. Yeah, and as autistic myself, it said I've got social deficits. But the teachers at the school kept calling me social, writing on certificates, oh, Daniel Moore is so social with his classmates. At first I thought they were telling white lies. But it got to a regular, and I thought, out of all the things they could compliment me on, why tell an autistic person with social deficits he is so social? That just doesn't make sense. So I came around into thinking, what if I am social? But I thought to myself, but I'm not even trying to be social. I'm just being me. And I looked all around the school playground, looked all around and found, oh, all of them are getting along. All of them are getting along. All of them are all autistic. Where are the social deficits? So it brought me around to the theory. Well, I can remember my dad telling me that people get along better with people they've got more in common with. All of us at this school have autism in common. So what if that's it? You know, where psychology says that familiarity and similarity are the most common factors towards attraction of who we're attracted to hang out with. What if that's simply the case? You know, what if autistic people simply get along better with other autistic people, and non-autistic with other non-autistic? So my experience brought me to that, but I didn't call it the double empathy problem. I just began saying non-autistic people or autistic people have autistic communication deficits, autistic interaction deficits, and autistic imagination deficits. So I were even able to come up with theories that when actual scientists, you know, those who actually work in the field, they come up with the same theory eventually, sooner or later. And studies go showing that I were right. That theory I made, yeah, it was right. It was simply that I'll get along better with people I've got more in common with. So in other words, other autistic people. And that's what I found during my experience. And now, just like to share with you all an experience by Bob's father, Bob Sr. Something which he did all the way back in the 1960s. We owe quite a great thank you to Bob's father for what he did in the 1960s. But Robert Kennedy Sr., Bob's father, went to a place called the Willowbrook Centre. It was a residential home for a maximum of 4,000 residents, but there were over 6,000 in there. The living conditions were even worse than zoo animals, than the cages that they keep zoo animals in. They had no beds, just such filthy clothing. They were doing experiments on the kids without informed consent. and all of his kids had developmental disabilities, all of them, including autism. Bob's father didn't want to cure autism. So what Bob's father did was, he's the one who exposed the Willowbrook scandal to the general public, and that led to having a lawsuit against the Willowbrook Centre. And the lawsuit led to people with developmental disabilities coming out of institutionalisation. Autistic people, well, the ones who were seen as autistic at that time, were no longer kept in homes, but became welcome to having an education, became welcome to being among the community, rather than locked in this home, where things were just so filthy. The way Robert Kennedy Sr. described it, he described the Willowbrook Centre as a snake pit. That's how he described it. So I would say those of us with developmental disabilities such as autism, intellectual disability, and all other developmental ones, but we are thank you to Bob's father, and that this just gives us another reason to reject Bob, since Bob is disgracing someone who actually helped people with developmental disabilities come out of institutionalisation and be members of the community. And unfortunately, just a few years later, Bob's father got murdered, got assassinated in 1968. So, in closing, those of you in the United States, I strongly recommend to you all, if you watch Bob's hearing, watch what he said to all the senators, and what the senators pointed out to him, and protest against him together, for the sake of your own country, such as that so many of the senators shared that over 300 hospitals in the US will be getting shut down, are in danger of shutting down, over 300 of them. Bob went giving 100 billion and 50 billion he just gave back, so it wasn't an infusion that he did for your medical services. He just took away from them 100 billion. He gave more money to Big Pharma, but he was claiming that he was against Big Pharma. So why give Big Pharma more money so that they can protect their most expensive drugs even more, to make the health services even more expensive for those of you in the United States? And another concern is, since the United Kingdom and the United States strongly influence each other, these conspiracy theorists, their conspiracies may influence the United Kingdom, and we might start getting deaths by the measles again. We might restart getting polio, people in the United Kingdom. But sorry, we don't want that spreading. So I strongly advise you all, protest against him and Donald Trump. Either get Donald Trump to sack him, or protest. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening.